We're TikTok famous. Not really. So my buddy and I were sitting in our little shop of a garage / studio, I guess, over on TikTok. I went all full Alex Jones conspiracy theory on the garage door over yonder. And we got these little insulation panels in there. I had a Sharpie. I don't know if you ever seen the Workaholics meme, but I was standing there. Anyway, we decided, screw it. We're going to try to do this, long format. And for those of you who are commenting on TikTok that, bring back the garage door, bring back the garage door. Garage door is a TikTok exclusive, so don't worry. So anyway, today, talking about yellow yet again, because the whole world seems to revolve around it. Yeah, it's almost like the sun is yellow. So the Teamsters, they claim that Yellow's filing bankruptcy after being told, hey, don't send your guys in because we're ceasing operations. Well, ceasing operations usually means, hey, everything's at a standstill, but that might not be the case. We'll get into that here in a minute. BNSF Railway Company. They are a railway company that is also union. They have a union called the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. Direct ties to the Teamsters. Basically, similar founding members, similar ideologies. Well, BNSF is currently holding Yellow Freight and Trailers until Yellow, who really doesn't have much cash flow. I think we looked it up and it said they had $1.6 billion. It's really not much. Is it $1.6 billion or $136 million? 163 million. And when it comes to the freight industry, that's a drop in the bucket. So Yellow hasn't paid their bill. BNSF is like, hey, we're just going to hold your stuff hostage until then. Anyway, there's a bunch of former employees of Yellow. They're trying to get their payout that was promised. Different pay grades got different stuff. So you have your dock workers, your supervisors, your managers, your operations managers, operations supervisors, terminal managers, yada yada. So different ones got different severance packages when they were let go. And some of them haven't seen most of the money yet. When you go through a layoff, you're supposed to get, bare minimum, your pay that was owed until that point for what you worked, and your PTO paid out, because that is earned and accrued by the employee. Well, a lot of people are not seeing that showing up in their bank accounts, and some of them have been laid off for a little minute now. The company handed that responsibility over to Epic, EIP or EPIQ. They're a small company out of Dublin, Ohio, suburb of Columbus. Per their website, Epic, a global technology-enabled services leader to the legal industry and corporations, takes on large-scale, increasingly complex tasks for corporate counsel, law firms, and business professionals with efficiency, clarity, and confidence. Now, those last three words are the ones I'm going to focus on. Efficiency. Well, if you were efficient, people would be getting their money. And it doesn't look like that's happening. Clarity. Well, if you were clear about it, then people would be getting their money. And they would know when they were getting their money. And confidence. Yeah. They're pretty confident that, hey, we're not going to get sued anyway, so whatever. Moving on. With union laborers laid off, the supervisors who made it through the round of the management layoffs are reported to be moving freight in the Teamsters' stead. Prior to this, the managers, supervisors, they were not allowed to even touch freight because that was, quote, stealing union jobs. Now, whatever side you fall on that, doesn't really matter. Yellow signed a contract. They abided, for the most part, to that contract, at least when it came to that aspect. Consolidation efforts are underway as management members are being seen taking empty trailers from smaller terminals and moving those trailers over to the bigger hub terminals. They're not the only ones doing it. It seems that they have hired out third-party trucking companies, probably small local operations, helping get this stuff moving, because how many supervisors and managers really had CDLs? I mean, probably what, 1 in 10, 1 in 7 maybe. All assets, they're all being itemized, accounted for, inventoried, and that's stuff like trucks, trailers, IT assets, keys, company documents. So it looks like they're heading for a restructuring, a Chapter 11 reorganization, if you will. Sources say that bankruptcy plans are not being communicated down the ranks. There could be any number of reasons for that, but right now, just like everyone else, we're in the dark, they're in the dark, so I guess we'll find out when we find out. Yellow employees, the remaining employees, are moving forward in efforts to clear all customer freight from the docks. This being further complicated as customers are being told, hey, you got to make your own arrangements. We're not going to drop your stuff off for you. So yeah, the customers are trying to retrieve their freight from the whatever still operational yellow terminals there are. And with a lack of work, a lot of those management teams, they're just sitting around, literally getting paid to sit. I'm sitting. I'd really like to get paid. Just saying. Food for thought. Now, many of these smaller terminals that they're taking all the assets from and moving to hub terminals, they're shutting them down, they're locking them up. And that's for the foreseeable future. Not a lot of us see really any use for those other than, hey, that's a real estate asset that if they file Chapter 11, they might be able to sell off, put towards some of the debts that they owe, like the $700 million COVID loan, which was, from my understanding, put in place so that they could ensure employees' pay. Instead, they go and buy companies like USF Holland. Anyway, they also owe a few $100 million to private entities, one of which is Apollo Global Management, which has ties to Jared Kushner of the former Trump administration. On top of that, a hedge fund known as MFN Management has been noticeably buying up a lot of stocks in Yellow. They currently own a roughly 10% stake in XPO Logistics, and they've purchased over 12 million shares in Yellow, a company who, at least on the public face, is going downhill like NASCAR fast. They bought up 12 million shares over the past couple of weeks. Now, we do have proof of this. And if I can get my hillbilly self to figure out how to use this computer. 17 hours ago, per whalewisdom.com, MFM Partners LP, the shares that they held at the time was 22 million and change. The change in shares, that's the shares that they bought, roughly 9.3 million more shares. And that's just 17 hours ago. We roll it back to 5 days ago. They bought stock not once, not twice, but thrice. They started out with 9.7 million. They bought 3.7 million, and then they had 12 million. And they bought another 3 million. So they must know something I don't, because I look at a company that's shutting down all their terminals and closing all their doors, and I seem to say, hey, do I own any stock of that company? Because if I do, I need to call my my CPA or whoever you use. Dump that stock like a bad habit. They seem to be buying it up. So that's a little interesting. We're going to follow along and see where that might go in the coming days, weeks, months, years, decades. So that brings us to our last little bit of complaint, communication, cries for morality. I don't know. But there's a little thing called the WARN Act. Now, the WARN Act requires businesses with over 100 employees to give 60-day notice. 60 days, that's 2 months, before they lay off people or they cease operations. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this, and I'll go into these exceptions. I'll also go into why, at least in the eyes of a guy who's not a lawyer, they don't apply. The WARN Act protects workers, their families, and communities. Don't know how it protects communities, whatever. By requiring most employers with 100 or more employees to provide notification 60 calendar days in advance of plant closings and mass layoffs. As we've seen over the past few months, Yellow has done a lot of mass layoffs. Yellow states in exit papers, which I, who have never been affiliated with Yellow or the Teamsters, somehow magically obtained. Sorry, got to put my glasses on because I'm getting old, I can't read. In these papers, I have a section I'm going to read to you. The company submits this notice to you in part to satisfy any obligation that may exist under the Federal Worker Adjustment and Restraining Notification Act, the WARN Act, and similar state laws. The company, Yellow, does not admit that such laws apply, or that notice is required. If no obligations exist, this notice is being provided to you voluntarily. Last time I checked, kind of legally required to, but that's beside the point. The company, Yellow, was not able to provide earlier notice of the shutdown as it qualifies under the unforeseeable businesses circumstances, faltering company, and liquidating fiduciary exceptions set forth in the WARN Acts. First red flag for me, they don't tie down which exception it applies to. They just say, hey, it's one of these three. Figure it out yourself. So I'm going to break down what those three are from someone who's not a lawyer. Can't stress that enough. The easiest one to get rid of is the liquidating fiduciary exception. WARN Act notice requirements generally do not apply to a bankrupt company. That means the company has filed bankruptcy. Now, Yellow hasn't filed, they haven't filed Chapter 11 or Chapter 7. As far as I know, those are the only two that they can file. They're too big for 16, too big for 11, subchapter 5. So since they haven't done those, well, the liquidating fiduciary reason, at least for me, not a lawyer, doesn't look like that's going to hold up. The unforeseeable business circumstances exception. That's what's called an affirmative defense. The employer must demonstrate that 1. The business circumstances causing the layoff were not reasonably foreseeable. And 2. Those circumstances specifically caused the layoff. If they weren't foreseeable, then why were they laying people off 6 months ago? If they weren't foreseeable, then why did we just go through multiple layoffs in rapid succession? If they didn't have the foresight, if they didn't foresee this, then, well, I don't know what the hell their board's getting paid for if they don't have that level of foresight. But that aside, kind of seems like that doesn't apply either, because their stock prices were down. Government was calling the loan on them. So they foresaw that. They signed on the dotted line and said, hey, yeah, we're going to have this paid off by so-and-so date. And they didn't. Meanwhile, they also have financial backers who they have a fiduciary duty to. They have to pay them their money. And they're like, hey, we're not going to be able to afford that. Well, if you know you can't afford it and you're trying to continue operation, then you communicate that, right? Well, the way they communicated that was through the layoffs that they did over the past 6 months. Heck, probably even longer. I'm not 100% sure. I think they laid off people in November or December. Don't quote me on that. Brings me to the last one. The unforeseeable business circumstances. Sorry, already did that one. A faltering company exception. This applies when prior to a plant closing or mass layoff, a company is actively seeking capital or business. I believe that. Their company. They want to stay afloat. Okay? And in reasonably good faith, believes that advance notice would prevent it from obtaining such capital or business. Now, here's where I have the issue with that. The advance notice. Well, their reputation's kind of tarnished already. Their financial backers, Apollo Global Management, they pulled out. They called the loan. Yellow couldn't adhere to the, hey, you got to have $200 million in cash flow, or we're not messing with you. And guess what? It dropped below there, sitting at 163. So, I don't really see the good faith there. I don't really see how advance notice would have hurt them any more than they could have already been hurt by the crap that they were pulling and the stuff that was going on before. It also goes on to state that this new capital or business would allow company to avoid bankruptcy. Really? Avoid bankruptcy? I think that's a little moot point. It's kind of clear to me that they're heading straight into a Chapter 11 restructuring. Again, not a lawyer, not a finance guy, just some random dude from the Midwest. However, sources state that freight customers and investors had already backed out over the Teamsters strike last month. Now, the Teamsters strike was narrowly avoided, but the damage was done to the company's reputation. Nobody who needs to get their stuff shipped is going to mess with a company who can't negotiate with their employees, the union, because their freight's going to get held up and stuck in limbo. Also, it's unclear as to whether this applies with Yellow, but none of those look like they apply. And a couple hours ago, there was a news story. I don't remember who it was from, but apparently a lawsuit, possibly class action, is being filed against Yellow for violating the WARN Act, because there's, at least in my mind, no way that they didn't see this coming, and there's no way that they could have salvaged their reputation, and they haven't filed bankruptcy. Those are the three main exceptions under the WARN Act. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I've been John. This has been Hillbilly News. Yes, we're unprofessional. We're raw. We're uncut. We don't care. Bye.